require a very particular type of energy. And so what did it take in history for humankind to make powerful decisions that were going in a new direction? So you can think of the after-war, the after-colonialism, the rise of South Africa. What did it take for people to make a change? And what would it take today for us to make the change that we need to make as a civilization, as peoples, as individuals, as organizations, as faith-based organizations? So we have less greed, a true sense of shared threat and common humanity, an aftermath of pandemics, engagement, people power, willingness to sacrifice in the wealthy world and be happier with less, a common enemy of fear, compassion, the gift of desperation, collaboration. We might need to go down that page a little bit, Alexandra, to see the new words coming. So thank you for contributing to this part of the webinar. We feel that what we want to do as faith-based organizations is also set a reflection, allow people to think for themselves about the changes that they want, about the changes that we need to demand, about the things we need to take up in our lives ourselves. With these words, I would like to introduce my colleague that will take on the next panel. So please go ahead, Magdalene. Susanna, sorry, Susanna. Susanna.
Thank you, Valerian. That was really powerful to have a chance to reflect on the presentations just now in that way. Thank you. My name is Susanna Mattingly. I'm from Friends World Committee for Consultation, which is the organisation representing Quakers worldwide. I'm pleased to be with you all today. In this next part of the webinar, we're going to hear some testimonies from people in some of the most climate vulnerable regions in the world. And we're thinking about what are the consequences for those most vulnerable to climate change based on the current trajectory that we have just heard about from our previous speakers. And when we talk about the advocacy work we do as people of faith, I think about our global family and our responsibility to seek out and support the voices of the marginalized communities at the forefront of climate justice and climate action, and really understand the human impacts of climate breakdown. Once we've heard from our speakers, we hope there will be time for some questions. So I invite you all to write your questions for the speakers in the Q&A box. It's easier for us if you do it in this Q&A box rather than the chat box, because it's easier for us to see your questions. And it should be at the bottom of your screen next to the chat icon. So because I'm aware of the time, I'm going to move straight on, and I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for the next section. So firstly, I'm delighted to welcome Kristen Turi Alexanderson from Sápmi, the Sami territory in Norway. Kristen is a Secretary General for the Sami Church Council in the Church of Norway. She is a Sami and belongs to a reindeer herding family. The Sami people is an indigenous people that lives in the northern part of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. Important traditional livelihoods among the Sami are reindeer herding, salmon fishing, hunting, and fishing, both in the fjords and inland. Kristen, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you. And I would like to thank you for the invitation to share with you some of how the Sami experience the consequence of climate change in our homeland. Yeah, as Susanna told you, I'm the Secretary General at the Sami Church Council. We work with Sami church life questions, but also with Sami human rights questions. And in this case, the question about the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis are essential issues. And as she said, I'm also reindeer herding. And for me, that the reindeer herding part is an identity as much as a livelihood. And since my childhood, our whole life centered around the well-being of our reindeers. In the winter, when the reindeers need to be in the inland, where the snow gets grainy because of the low temperatures, we move to the inland. The grainy snow makes pasture accessible for the reindeers. They manage to shovel the snow away from the ground. And in the summertime, when the reindeers need to be in the coast because of high mountains, we move to the coast. The high mountains where nutritious grass grows at the edge of the slowly melting snow patches, and where the snow patches provides a rest from insects on warm summer days. But this is now changing. Because of climate changes, the cold periods come more seldom in the winter. We experience rain in the winter. These weather conditions are negative to the grazing conditions for the reindeer. The snow gets heavier so that the reindeer moss is harder accessible for the reindeer. Rain followed by lower temperature gives icing layers that makes it harder or impossible for the reindeer to dig through. The increased carbon dioxide concentrations also increased forest growing that causes poorer growth conditions for the reindeer moss. In the summertime, we see that the snow patches melt faster than before. It means that these nutritious plants grow in a shorter period. And once the snow has melted, the land gets dry and new plants will not grow. And I guess we all have experienced the reduction of the number of insects. And last June, here at least, it was alarmingly few insects in our reindeer grazing land. I don't know if it's because they were delayed or if they have disappeared, but that was the case. The changes we experience in the wintertime forces reindeer herders to give additional food to the reindeers. This is costly, and it forces the reindeer herders to focus more on how to earn more money. The focus changes from living together with the animal that provides us Sami all we need to farming and meat production. Feeding also changes humans' interaction with reindeers. And I'm afraid that it will change the way the reindeers also behave against humans. And what this means, I don't know today. And the last point I want to make today is that when governments and global leaders think out solutions to reduce climate changes, it is important that the solutions don't harm the indigenous peoples even more. Indigenous peoples' land is often the least developed land in a country. It's just wild areas and it's good space for huge industry projects. Several indigenous peoples' organizations have pointed out that the green market development is increasingly involved in land grabbing and eviction of indigenous peoples. In the Nordic countries, the new mode of green industry includes taking Sami land for the development of mining industry or windmill parks to solve the climate change and save the planet. This is actually quite interesting. In the beginning of this century, establishment of mining was still looked upon as industry that provides local jobs and tax income to local municipalities. It was so important that we needed to take the land. However, this argument has now changed. And now, at least in Norway, the argument is that we need mining to be able to save the planet. For me, this tells me that things have not changed. Sadly, the climate change is not a crisis that forces us to change our behavior. Instead, it seems like it's a source to increase companies' income and wealth. And in this thinking, the destruction of indigenous people's land has just changed its expression. Today, we need to destroy the land so we can get rich while we save our planet. And for me, it seems like the only ones that really are forced to change their way of living because of the climate changes are indigenous peoples, people in rural areas, or people in poorer countries. Not because we caused the problem, but because our way of living and our land is still here to destroy. And I cannot understand that this is right. And we indigenous people must be able to continue our traditional way of living. Otherwise, we too must move to the cities. And you all know the quick urbanization that we see today will cause even more problems to our climate, to the societies, and to the individuals. And this, I think, is what we as faith communities must stand up for the right that people can continue to live on their traditional lands and continue to live their traditional livelihoods. As humans, we are set to manage God's creation, but we need to put moderation in the center, so we never take more than the nature is willing to give us. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to hear the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It was wonderful to hear from you. I'm sure people will have questions, so we will come back to those at the end. But I, again, remind people, if you would like to ask questions, to put them in the Q&A, and we will come to those after we have heard the speakers. I thought, Kristen, what you said about the way the impacts of climate change are changing the interaction between humans and the reindeer, and how you don't really know what the long-term impact of that will be, is really interesting. And an important point you made about the land grabbing from the green industries, which I think is often not something that we hear much about. So thank you for sharing with us. I'm going to move on to our next speaker now. And I'm really pleased to introduce Janat Akhtar Shimu. Is one of the group leaders of a vulnerable community in Sylhet, a city about 300 kilometers northeast of the capital, Dhaka, in Bangladesh. She works as a cashier and an executive member of the group, and she lives with her husband and 3 school-aged children. She's the only earning member of her family, as her husband had an accident that left him disabled 8 years ago. She operates a small business of handicraft making and sewing, and she's been learning about ways to increase her resilience and reduce her vulnerabilities to climate change impacts through Islamic Relief's Climate Justice Programme. And I think I'm right that Janat will be using an interpreter to share her story with us today. So welcome to the both of you. Janat, I will just try to unmute you. Here we go.
Thank you. Our participant will shortly join us. Actually, this is the iftar time here, so sorry for the delay. So here is our participant Janat Akhtar Shimu to share her story, and I will be assisting her to translate her speech to English. So thank you. It's up to you, Appa. So I will request Appa to give it your porichoy diye apni shuru karo. Just go ahead. Thank you. A second, please respond if you can hear us, because the reception here is not very good.
We can hear very well.
Thank
you. Just a little slower, and I think I can follow. Thank you.
Thank you.
আসসালামু আলাইকুম। আমি প্রথমে ধন্যবাদ দিতে চাই যে এই অনলাইনে মিটিং এ আয়োজকদের আমাকে কথা বলার সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য। আমি মোসাম্মদ জান্নাত আক্তার শিমু। আমি বাংলাদেশে জনবহুল শহর সিলেট এর একটি বস্তিতে বাস করি। অনেকেই মনে করে শহর মানেই খুব ভালো এবং আরামদায়ক জায়গা, কিন্তু না, এখানে বসবাসরত মানুষদের নিয়ম নীতি বিভিন্ন সমস্যা মোকাবেলা করতে হয়। এ সকল সমস্যার মধ্যে পানি ও পয় নিষ্কাশন, খাদ্য, পুষ্টি, নিরাপদ নিরাপদ বাসস্থান, শিক্ষা, জীবিকা ইত্যাদি সমস্যা অন্যতম। বস্তি এলাকার মানুষ অস্বাভাবিক অস্বাস্থ্যকর পরিবেশে বসবাস করতে বাধ্য। এখানে মানুষ ন্যূনতম মৌলিক চাহিদার নিশ্চয়তা নেই। একটি ঘরে 7 থেকে 8 জন মানুষ বাস করে। খাওয়ার পানির জন্য দীর্ঘ লাইন দাঁড়াতে হয়। 20 থেকে 30টি পরিবার এর জন্য রয়েছে একটি পায়খানা। ঘরের আশেপাশে খুবই অপরিষ্কার, নেই ভালো ড্রেনের ব্যবস্থা। একটু বৃষ্টি হলেই ঘরের মধ্যে পানি ঢুকে যায়। আমরা কেউ এখানকার স্থায়ী বাসিন্দা নয়। এখানে আমরা রিফিউজির মতো বাস করি। আবার নিয়মিত ঘর ভাড়া দিতে হয়। আমরা গ্রামে বাস করতাম। নদী ভাঙনে আমরা আমাদের সবকিছু হারিয়ে এরপর আমরা কাজের সন্ধানে বাধ্য হয়ে শহরে এসেছি। আমার মতো এখানে শত শত মানুষ বাস করে, যারা আমার মতোই বাধ্য হয়ে শহরে এসেছে। শহরে এসে আমরা আরো নতুন দুর্যোগের মধ্যে পড়েছি। নিয়মিত বিভিন্ন প্রাকৃতিক ও মানব সৃষ্টি দুর্যোগ আমাদের জীবন জীবিকা ধ্বংস করে দিচ্ছে। এ সকল দুর্যোগের মধ্যে আছে জলবদ্ধতা, বন্যা, অগ্নিকাণ্ড, অতিবৃষ্টি ইত্যাদি। এরপরও বিভিন্ন ধরনের মহামারী আমাদের জীবন জীবিকার হুমকি মুখে ফেলে দিচ্ছে। বর্তমানে করোনা মহামারী দীর্ঘ 1 বছর যাবত আমাদের অস্বাভাবিক জীবনকে বাধ্যগ্রস্ত করে দিয়ে রেখেছে। এখন থেকে 20 বা 30 বছর আগে এখানকার অবস্থা এমন ছিল না। আমি মনে করি জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের কারণে এইসব নতুন দুর্যোগ দেখা দিচ্ছে। বর্তমানে আমাদের এলাকার আবহাওয়ার ব্যাপক পরিবর্তন দেখা দিচ্ছে। সময় মতো বৃষ্টি হচ্ছে না। যখন বৃষ্টি হচ্ছে তখন একটানা কয়েকদিন বৃষ্টি হয়ে জলাবদ্ধতা দেখা দিচ্ছে। অতিরিক্ত গরম পড়ে এবং এর ফলে ঘন ঘন অগ্নিকাণ্ড হচ্ছে। যখন ইসলামিক রিলিফ বাংলাদেশ আমাদের এখানে জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের বিষয় প্রকল্প শুরু করে, তখন আমি এই প্রকল্পের সাথে যুক্ত হই। প্রকল্পে বিভিন্ন কার্যক্রমের মাধ্যমে আমি জানতে পারি কিভাবে আমি আমার জীবিকাকে দুর্যোগ ও জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনে সহনশীল করতে পারি। আমার মতো আরো অন্য সদস্যরা মিলে আমরা একটি দল গঠন করি এবং আমি সেই দলের ক্যাশিয়ার। আমি জানি কিভাবে একটা দল পরিচালনা করতে হয়, কিভাবে সদস্যদের মধ্যে কথা বলতে হয়। জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের বিরূপ প্রভাব আমাদের জীবনে হুমকি মুখে ফেলে দিয়েছে। আমরা জানা মতে পৃথিবীতে বড় বড় দেশই জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের জন্য অনেকাংশেই দায়ী, কিন্তু এর ফল ভোগ করতে হচ্ছে আমাদের মতো গরিব খেটে খাওয়া মানুষদের। আমি আজ আপনাদের মাধ্যমে পৃথিবীর সবার কাছে অনুরোধ করতে চাই, দয়া করে জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের বিরোধ করুন, পৃথিবীর বাসযোগ্য রাখুন, আমাদের বেঁচে থাকতে দিন। ধন্যবাদ আপনাদের সবাইকে আমার কথা বলার সুযোগ করে দেওয়ার জন্য। আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
So thank you. This was her speech in Bangla, and I would like to translate them in English. Inshallah. Thank you. So at first, Assalamu alaikum. I would like to thank the organizer and moderator to give me an opportunity to participate on this online meeting. I must, Muhammad Jannat Akhtar Shimu. I live in Islam of crowd city of Bangladesh called Sylhet. Many of us assured that city life is very easy and comfort, but the dwellers here had to face a lot of difficulties in everyday life. Among all these difficulties, water and proper sanitation, food and nutrition, safe residence, education, and livelihoods are the most remarkable one. The slum dwellers are obliged to live in unhealthy environment. This is no certain to fulfill the basic needs of them. More than 7 to 8 individuals lives in a single room house. A single latrine are forced to use by 20 to 30 families. The surroundings are very unhygienic, lack of proper drainage system, and a little rain cause water logging. We are not permanent resident here. We live like refugee here, but have to pay the regular house rent. We used to live in the village, but due to river erosion, we lost everything. Then we have to move towards the city in search of livelihood. Like us, hundreds of others migrate from village due to different kind of disasters. After getting here, our situation worsened. We have faced different kind of disaster here. There is a regular occurrence of natural and man-made disasters, and that damage the life and livelihoods. There is a number of disasters like waterlogging, flood, fire, heavy rainfall. In addition, different types of pandemic throw us in a situation where our life and livelihood fall in at risks. In present, the corona pandemic handled our everyday life for last 1 year. The situation here was not at the same as before 20 or 30 years. I think that climate change in the causes all these disasters. In present, we notice a huge difference in the environment of our area. There is no predictable time of raining, and when it rains, it continues for several days and cause waterlogging. Excessive heat and frequent fire incident very common now. After starting a climate resilient project by Islamic League Bangladesh here, I become a member. Through different intervention of the project, I learned how to make my livelihood climate and disaster resilient. We have a group consist of some other members like me, and I am the cashier of the group. Now I know how to operate a group to future development and how to speak towards the group members. The consequences of climate change lead us our life towards a threat. According to my knowledge, the big countries of the world are largely responsible for the climate change. But we the poor people have to pay. We have to suffer. My humble request to the people of this evening and this event through this medium, please resist climate change and make the world habitable and let us to live. Thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Janat. We really appreciate you sharing your words with us. I'm just going to repeat the very last thing that you said to make sure everybody heard that your humble request for people listening is to resist climate change and to make the world habitable. I just want to make sure people heard that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to move on to our next speaker and then come back to questions, as I said. So the third speaker and final speaker for this section today is young Ezer. He's a young Quaker from Burundi. He currently lives in Kenya, and he acts as a youth leader in the African section of the global Quaker community. And he aims to inspire young Quakers to pursue personal faith, peace, and sustainability through actions that reflect Quaker values. Young is currently a senior computer science student at Strathmore University in Nairobi, in Kenya, and he's been researching and working with Kenyan small-scale farmers and investigating the impact of climate change on farming and pastoral activities in Africa. Young has actually pre-recorded his words in advance for us because he couldn't be here live. So hopefully we're going to share a short video with you with his words. If Rebecca can bring that up, that would be brilliant.
Depending on where you are. My name is Young and I'm a Quaker from Burundi and currently live in Kenya. And beside working with young Quakers globally through the Friends World Committee for Consultation, FWCC, I have been closely working with Kenyan farmers and doing some research on the impact of climate change in Africa. Recently, the rise of temperatures in the Indian Ocean caused unpredictable and irregular rainfalls in East Africa. Burundi, which is part of East Africa, is experiencing flash flood which displaced almost 13,000 people and caused over 45 deaths. This obstructed access to food, water, education, and healthcare, and caused many other damages. A couple of months ago, I read a report by the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs regarding this impact of climate change in Burundi. It was indicated that Burundi is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. I then asked one of my friends, can you imagine that Burundi is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change in the world? I told him. And probably many people don't know anything about Burundi. And my friend responded, no way. He argued that that was not true because he assumed that due to the fact that Burundi doesn't emit so much greenhouse gases to cause global warming, its carbon footprint is of no importance to cause the rise of temperatures or to trigger disruption of climate. So I thought that the thing with climate change is that it involves everyone. Whether one is emitting more carbon gases, less, or simply being affected by the effect of climate change, we all need to work together collaboratively as a single community to explore how the issue of rising temperatures and climate effect can be resolved. Because climate change affects everyone, whether you are in Burundi, Kenya, UK, or Australia, we are all affected. Our planet, our environment is an asset. It's an economic asset, but also an asset for human life. Climate change is real and is already impacting farming, pastoral activities, animal and human beings. In East Africa, drought and unpredictable rainfalls are affecting large-scale farming, agricultural activity, and the economy generally. Most farmers in Africa rely on traditional or indigenous knowledge to make decisions, most of which lead to short-term plans, seasonal or weekly choices of what crops to grow on an interval of 6 months or less. This increases the vulnerability to future effects of climate change on their farms. Farmers lack climate information. Either the existing information is not well accessed or is too probabilistic or not understandable for them. Being resilient to climate change requires a transformative change, moving from coping to adapting. This not only involves providing farmers with the right information, but also training them or educating them on how to establish long-term plans. For instance, through biodiversity preservation, land use plans, adaptive capacities, and socioeconomic early plannings. As a Quaker, I believe that we ought to protect the creation of God. I believe that all humans equally reflect God's image. They have the right to equal opportunity. Hence, all human beings, including our future generations, shouldn't be affected or suffer from uncared for or irresponsible human acts. My Quaker values of community challenge me to think about the others, examining my lifestyle and how much resources I consume. For me, living simply means utilizing only the resources that I need and avoiding wasting extra resources. Water is one of the limited resources. Using less and recycling it guaranteed that those scarce water resources are optimized and reserved for those who might like it due to global warming. Simplicity also called me to only produce and use the energy that I need, which I believe can be through renewable energy sources. The effort to improve the reliability on renewable energy is coupled with further research work and commitment toward attaining a stage where solely renewable energy will be able to sustain the human needs. I believe that we all are a community, hence we need to care about each other the same way each part of the human body cares about each other. Climate change brings us all together because it's a global issue. Everyone is affected, everyone is responsible and ought to be responsible. The knowledge that we are all connected guide my understanding that the human race constitutes a single community. Thank you.
Thank you to Young for his words. I like how he talks about our interconnectedness as a human family. think that's very true of today, when we're all joining from all different parts of the world with this shared concern. I'm sorry that some people couldn't hear very well. It's probably possible that we can share that recording afterwards with participants, so don't worry, I'm sure we will get to hear, everybody will get to hear. And I'm sorry the video was slightly obscured at times. We'll make sure that you get those words as well. So I don't think we have very much time, but Valeria and Henrik, do we have time for a couple of questions?
Or
Yep.
maybe you could invite the people to share the final remarks, just like Kulekuni did.
Okay, yes, good idea. So I will invite Riston first, if you have any final remarks from listening to the others' presentations, and perhaps sharing a key message you would like participants today to take away from this webinar and into their advocacy work around the world.
Yeah, thank you. There was a comment in the chat, and it said something about why do we manage to get so much extra funding for the COVID-19 crisis or pandemic, and why can't we manage to do it for the climate change? And I think one answer is it's because there are so many companies that earn money from resisting climate change or working with this. And because people are not, the companies are earning money, it also becomes a question about value or ethics. For example, that the Norwegian government has a policy that says that it's better to make new energy projects rather to maintain old projects or old facilities that are already being built. So I think we as a faith communities also need to go into these ethical questions about how the politicians plan the solutions and how do they plan to work. So this, I think, is the thing that we really can, where we really can give something to them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Riston. Yeah, very, very good point. Janat, are you still with us? I can't see you on the screen, but I hope you're there. I'd just like to invite you to give any reflections, final remarks, and if there is a key message you would like people to take away from today.
Thank you.
ধন্যবাদ আপনাদের সবাইকে। আসসালামু আলাইকুম। আমাকে এই মানে অনলাইনে মিটিং এ ডাকার জন্য আপনাদের সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ, এবং আপনারা সবাই দোয়া করবেন যে আমাদের দেশের আবহাওয়া জলবায়ু পরিবর্তন যাতে তাড়াতাড়ি হয়, সবাই মিলে আমরা যেন এইটার জন্য মানে কাজ করতে পারি, সেই জন্য আপনারা সবাই দোয়া করবেন। এবং আমাদের দেশে যে করোনা মহামারী শুরু হয়েছে ওইটার কাছ থেকে যেন আমরা সবাই রক্ষা পাই এবং সবাই যেন নিজেকে সেফে রাখতে পারি, সেই জন্য আপনারা সবাই কাছে দোয়া চাই এবং সবাই সুস্থতা কামনা করি। আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
Thank you. Actually, she means to everyone, yes, everyone blessings in this pandemic situation here, and asking the urging to all the people here to that work on the climate change issues as they are the major victims, and the result of climate change is affecting very badly to us. So they're asking your blessings as well as your action to reduce the climate change issues. And that's all from her, and thanking for the opportunity here to talk with you and giving this wide platform to us to talk her issues here. And that's all from her side, and looking forward to hear from you also. Thank you.
Thank you, Janat, and thank you for joining us, and we will hold you in our prayers, of course. So I think I'm going to pass the word back to Valerian and Alexandra now for the next reflective break. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thanks a lot, Susanna, and thanks a lot, Janet, and all the different panelists that we have had for now. I really can still hear from our climate witness panelists how vulnerable human beings are when they're facing climate change and disasters. And this shows us how much we need to act. And each one of us in his own way reminded us of this reality here. So we have here a new question for you, because in the same Mentimeter that we had before, so you can press again on the www.menti.com and add the code 1341 6197, because your reflection is very important for us. We want you to be fully participating in our reflection today. So what we were thinking here is that what do we need to change? Because we were asked by the witnesses to change as individuals and communities, to care for nature and our environment. So what do we need to change for this to happen? The reflection I had in relationship with that is, if I don't have a relationship with Mother Nature, with the Pachamama, with my surrounding, then I won't make much of a difference in my lifestyle. But when I encompass it into a relationship, then maybe, surely, we can change. So let's see what you are feeding back to us on this question. Maybe you can show us the Mentimeter, Alexandra. Thank you. So behavior, encouragement, awareness. These changes can happen practically in our lives, at work, in our communities, in our governments. And I think we had some music that we were going to play for you. Alexandra, can we put the music on so that the reflection goes on with more? I don't know, the Mentimeter just left us, but Alexandra sharing again the screen with us.
And I apologize, the music is not coming, so I'm going to try and fix that.
Okay. So what we were thinking is that all this comes from inside of us. I think we need to have a deep commitment. So within this reflection, we were thinking that we can use time to guide ourselves and see how we change, reconnecting, moderate ourselves, have green spaces in cities, create more society, change the way our minds work, have more love, have local engagement, more hope, each other, more love for nature and care, educate others, respect the energy, harmony of humans, but also animals and all living beings on the planet. Consider the importance of the way we use our mind for the forest, the mountain, like the grassroots solutions, change the way we do transportation, bring more hope into our societies, understand the power of our thoughts, the quantum power of our attitudes and respect towards life, solidarity, resilience. And youth for the future of tomorrow. We have an unbreakable relationship with the environment. So thank you for participating. And Henrik will be moderating the next part of the panel. So Henrik, the word is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to moderate this session, and I'm not going to take so much time from our panelists to go into the discussion about the advocacy work and the coming up COP. I would like to invite first Matthias Söderberg from ACT Alliance to share his thoughts in his first 5 minutes. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Henrik, and thanks to everyone else. It's been really inspiring and interesting. From the ACT Alliance, we are already very engaged in the process towards the COP. And it's important to stress that the focus is not specifically on COP26, but on increasing and scaling up the ambition around the world. And that is done both, of course, through international processes, but also through national advocacy and where we really push governments to take action. When it comes to the COP and to the UN process, it's as we all know, very influenced by the pandemic, and we don't really know exactly how the COP will take place. We know now that there will be negotiations in June and that there will be online negotiations, but that there won't be any decisions really. They are postponed. How it will be in Glasgow, we don't know yet. In any case, there are 2 tracks in relation to the COP where we try to focus. One is the negotiations and the decisions which needs to be taken. These are the agreements where governments needs to agree and where there is a fixed agenda. And the other one is the national developments, which are influenced a lot by media and public engagement. And this is also important to remember when we attend these big meetings. I will get back to that. But first to the formal agenda where ACT Alliance will engage. We know that the COP will have a lot of different topics on the agenda, and many of them are quite technical and difficult to get into, but they are still important. And one of the things, for example, which will be agreed according to the plan, it's the negotiations about carbon trading. How to do this and how this can contribute to scaled up ambition. This is a really tricky area, and a bad agreement can have negative effect on the future ambition. So it's really important to make sure that this is ending in a way which is good for the climate and good for humanity and people and our creation. So this is obviously an important issue. But there are other issues which are also still technical but important, and that one of them is the climate finance agreement for climate finance post 2025. As you may know, there is an existing agreement that developed countries should mobilize climate finance, but this agreement is only lasting until 2025, and after that time there will be a new agreement. And negotiations in Glasgow will start about how to develop a new target and how to make sure that finance and support actually is scaled up. I mean, it's not just like it is now, a question of moving numbers around in an Excel sheet. We need the money and we need the support to climate action, and that must be the focus. But as I said, there is also the other track, which is more focused on national action. And the COP is still important to promote this national action. And that's because the world is looking. When ministers are meeting, media will be present, and the national debates will be more focused on what's happening in other countries. And that's why it's so important also to address other topics at the COP. And that's why ACT Alliance also will use this opportunity to, for example, talk about the current climate finance, the promise to mobilize 100 billion a year from 2020. This is something we need to bring up because it's not happening, at least not what we can see. And the focus is so much on mitigation compared to adaptation. So we need to bring this to the attention of media and to make sure that it also is brought back to governments back home. And of course, as also addressed earlier in this webinar, the NDCs, the national climate plans, national plans which needs to be scaled up. We know that what is on the table right now is far from what we need to reach a 1.5 degree target as agreed in the Paris Agreement. And therefore, we need to also use the opportunity to call for action, call for scaled up ambition, and to make sure that this is not forgotten. And finally, loss and damage. Loss and damage is a key part of the climate debate, but it's still not getting the sufficient attention in the UN talks. And this is something we will continue to push and to bring up to make sure that those who are most vulnerable to climate change, their interests also are cared for in the UN talks. So this is the agenda for ACT Alliance, part of it at least. As I said in the beginning, we cannot wait for the COP to take action. We continue to push our governments all the time because this is what is needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthias. It's always a pleasure to hear from you and ACT Alliance, who is an organization that have been to the COPs for many years and brought people of faith from one part of the faith tradition, so to say, and also we're very open to cooperate with other and also on the interfaith based. So I'm very happy to have you here. I would like to invite Shaheen Ashraf from UK, that is representing Islamic Relief, to hear some of your opinions on the COP and on the climate advocacy and what you see is the most important part that we are working on over the coming year, so to say. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthias. And thank you, Enric. So the topic I was given, Enric, was around just transition. And if you don't mind, I can speak to that. I mean, it's very important what Matthias had said, and leading on from that, you know, a lot of us are hoping that we can have more just solutions to some of the issues that we're seeing around the world around climate change. So one of the things we are advocating for is a just transition. You know, the International Trade Union Confederation, the ITUC, defines a just transition as decent work, social inclusion, and poverty eradication. And for us, whilst we're doing that, that's reducing emissions in line with our global commitments on tackling the climate breakdown. We have so many people in so many different places around the world. What is going to happen to that economy of people who are actually employed in those fossil fuel industries. So part of this is trying to look at what this transition to a zero carbon economy looks like. For us, when you're looking at a transition to a zero carbon economy, you're looking at workers, you're looking at localities, you're looking at industries and nations, and it comes back to Susanna, the very thing that you spoke about, that you were moderating on, with the communities that we work with and the communities that we're working with. And it's certainly a very interesting case that building a zero economy, carbon economy, is a profound matter for all of us, our faith communities, particularly when it comes to social justice, and particularly when it comes to, okay, who pays, who benefits, and to what extent do global actors play its part in averting the humanitarian crisis that affects organizations like ours from Islamic Relief Worldwide, and including organizations like ACT Alliance and any other organizations on this call today. And we are seeing that actual climate breakdown is already causing and will continue to cause destruction. After all, most of us, let's take our own nations who bear particularly I take my nation in the UK, who bear a particularly high historical responsibility for carbon emissions. So there will be immediate physical risks to industry from climate change itself, weather events such as droughts, floods, storms, that have a profound impact on our economy, like the year that's gone, the year that we've seen an absolute lost production because of COVID-19, which have appeared and which speaks to different languages around the world. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, where and how are we going to be living in the next 30 years, Henrik? And then this is a really important thing, because then what do we do as faith communities? How do we upscale our work within this space? So if our future is at stake for this generation and generations to come, then what is it that we have to do? So there's a couple of things I believe, and so this is my opinion. So I believe that this can be a solution, just transition can be a solution to the climate crisis. I believe that this is a solution that meets the climate crisis at the scale and urgency that is absolutely necessary. It's a timescale that we really do need to transition and change our economies over the next decade. People talk about building back better, but I say let's build back differently. And we as faith communities can do that. I think that the past climate campaigns and solutions have almost been like a plaster. We're almost sticking to the edges, but not quite offering the right solution. So just transition is a framework that shifts to an economy that is ecologically sustainable, that is equitable for all members, and it's for all members of society. After centuries of global plunder, the profit-driven, the growth-dependent industrial economy is severely undermining the very life support systems of this planet. So economy based on extracting resources from a finite ecosystem, what do we do in that space? So the system to regenerate will eventually come to an end. But what we'll also see is workers at the forefront of this and ensure that there is a transition for communities and workers. When we're talking about the system that eventually will come to an end, we have to think about it's either through collapse or intentional reorganization. So who is going to intentionally reorganize our systems? I know that transition, we know, is inevitable, but what is not inevitable is justice. The transition solution is how we avoid the climate crisis, but also about how we make an equal future that's livable, where communities, like the communities that were, the community that was speaking about the reindeers, where livable communities can thrive. And this is something that people are looking forward to as a possible solution, as a future solution. For example, in Britain, we are
Do we have lost the connection?
I think so.
It looks like it.
I hope that Shaheen will soon be back. Yeah, because it was maybe it was too powerful for the internet to have this
political changing facing that the UK faces as it decarbonizes.
Shaheen, just
and it's important
sorry
to also,
to...
I have a feminist framework on this, but I won't share that at the moment. But given the urgency of both climate crisis and the economic forces operating from the UK industry, only a shared natural mission can work. And I think this is where faith communities can play a vital role. A just transition, which will mean that emphatically, not just a phrase, but to be affixed to a technocratic climate policy. It has real meaning. It implies the centering of rights and the needs and the voices of workers in policy decision-making. So as faith and climate activists, which we all are, who have long expressed a strong sense of shared identity and solidarity, placing great emphasis on supporting each other and
Well, seems a bit unstable, the connection. So yes, I think we should, hopefully we can come back to Shane for some last words, but if Olivia,
that builds on the heritage, that builds on the identity, that builds on the vibrancy of existing people, the vibrancy of existing places, the vibrancy of industry. Rather than appearing to jettison or belittle the space that we're in, we need identity, we need voice, we need control. And this unique heritage will bring about the pragmatic dialogue that we speak of. So how do we do this? There's three things. Delivering trust in transition, and we as faith communities have to do that. We've got to commit our government to leadership and a Green New Deal. And a national plan such as a Green New Deal is delivered to deliver a just transition in practice and set a clear mandate for industrial planning, delivering social justice and rapid decarbonisation together. And more ambitious deadlines that we would like to see. We would like to make sure that workers are empowered to play an active role in their spaces. When we talk about a just transition fund, like we're talking about a green climate fund, we're talking about government topping up wages and reskilling people who will not be part of that will not be in a part of an industry. We're also talking about core working hours, and we've seen it within the pandemic, how people who've been in certain skilled areas have then lost their jobs as a result of it. But part of this, the green climate, I believe, has to, ensure that governments upskill people and reskill people. And then the last thing I wanted to say was localizing transition planning. So when we're talking about transitions, when we're talking about new local economic partnerships, we're talking about broader mandates and a democratic membership more than what we have in the existing. But one thing I do want to say before I end is this needs to go further with a real commitment to what some have instead we call social power. It needs to go beyond the consultation to true co-design of people's voices. It requires social dialogue in essence, and it's about embedding the importance of different voices, particularly of those directly affected by policy, into that policy making. This space is ongoing, and we're expected cultural and governance process for the management of trade-offs. The very essence, what I believe, is just transition. Thank you. Back to you, Enric.
Thank you so much, Shaheen. I don't know if you recognize, but we lost you for some seconds during your presentation, but I think we got the most part of it, and maybe we can come back with some closing remarks. But very happy to hear this very powerful message to come, and on just transition. I know that we are many from faith communities that always sort of stress the importance to have a social just transition and not only look at the environmental side of it. So if we have planetary boundaries, there must also be some a social level or floor that we can stand upon. So I'm so happy to hear this from you, and thank you so much. I want to give the floor to Olivia Fox, and hope that you come from a Buddhist perspective to see what is your reaction on this, and what is your message to us to see. Do you have Olivia with us? Yeah, there you are. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Go ahead.
And also thank you so much, Shaheen and Matthias. So I'm here really representing, so I am a Buddhist, and I will talk to that a little bit, but I'm also representing the COP Faith Task Group, which is now called Make COP Count Group in the UK, which is affiliated to Faith for the Climate. So it's an interfaith group, which is really trying to put pressure on the government. So we basically, it was created to make the most of the opportunity that we have at this moment with the UK government hosting COP26 in Glasgow. And we have three aspects that we've been, sort of three strands that we've been really working to. One is transformation, which I can hear has already been talked about quite a bit, advocacy, and also hospitality, which we are leaving to the Scottish faith groups, which is wonderful. So I'm also part of the advocacy group, and this is what I'm talking about today. And I just want to first of all thank Livy Hanks from the Quakers for leading and inspiring the group and writing most of the advocacy asks and briefings. So the first thing I want to say is that as faith groups, we have a moral voice. We have a powerful responsibility and a strong moral voice, particularly when working together in collaboration. And I believe that's because of our spiritual and transformative teachings and practices, that because of these, we must all find the inner moral courage to confront the crisis we're facing and to transform ourselves and our society. We also have solidarity and engagement with the poorest communities around the world. And it was wonderful to come in to hear some of the testaments that we've just heard earlier on. And these communities, as we've already heard, are most impacted by the climate crisis, which is posing an existential threat. Also, that we all have embedded in our teaching social justice, and really about the climate crisis affecting humanity at its deepest level. And lastly, our relationship with the living world, which in Buddhism we perceive as a web of interconnectedness. So we are nature. There is no dualism, there's no separation. And it seems to me that this idea of dualism, separation of body and mind, self and environment, self and other, is what is the cause of a lot of our crisis. So the Make COP Count group brings together a wide range of members of different faith traditions from across the country. And we're working together to make sure the COP conference makes a real difference and to bring about a just and sustainable society, as Shaheen's already mentioned. One of the purposes of the group is to try to provide a unified faith voice on key issues. We want to push the UK government, again, like Matthias said, it's making it local and national, to do more to tackle the climate crisis and its impacts. And we want to support and encourage all people of faith to get the message across to decision makers and also to their own communities. Our two agreed priority issues focus on finance and justice. So money is of course not the whole solution to this crisis, but unless we start directing money away from fossil fuels and into clean energy and addressing climate impacts, all our government's pledges will be hollow. In terms of finance, we want the government to stop funding climate breakdown. There should be an immediate end to the use of public money to support fossil fuel extraction and power in the UK and overseas. The UK government claims it has no fossil fuel subsidies, but international studies consistently find that it does, and that its transparency on the issue is particularly bad. Fossil fuel subsidies are government actions which lower the cost of producing or using fossil fuels. The majority of UK fossil fuel subsidies are in the form of tax breaks, including for oil and gas extraction. Although it's important to make sure people on low incomes are not negatively affected by things like fuel taxes, studies show that globally fossil fuel subsidies overwhelmingly benefit the rich. They're not there to help poor people. A lot of campaign groups and NGOs, including Christian Aid and other faith-based charities, have campaigned for a long time for the UK government to stop subsidising fossil fuel projects elsewhere in the world, including through the aid budget, which is how it has happened. The government has finally changed its policy on this, so now we're focusing on the subsidies that exist here in the UK. So pressure is actually working. And our second demand is loss and damage, which again Matthias talked to about earlier, and justice. So to make polluters pay. The UK government should show leadership on establishing new and additional sources of finance for countries suffering loss and damage caused by climate-related disasters. This is embedded in the Paris Agreement, so we need to use that. It was one of the pillars of the Paris Agreement, and it refers to impacts so severe that we cannot adapt to them. That includes things that change slowly, like sea level rises, as well as extreme weather events like severe hurricanes. Even though the Paris Agreement mentions the need for action on loss and damage, there has been no progress on agreeing how this should be funded. We need a global loss of damage and damage fund of at least $75 billion a year. That should be paid for by those who have caused the crisis, for example, through a global fossil fuel extraction tax or an aviation levy. Debt cancellation could also free up finance for global South countries to address loss and damage. We want to make sure that this issue is discussed at COP26, and loss and damage has not been on the agenda until now, although Alok Sharma, the COP president designate, has recently for the first time included it in his letter. Our pressure is working, beginning to work. So just to finish, we are preparing a brief at the moment with more details about this that anybody can use. It's nearly ready and we can share it once it is. We want as many faith representatives as possible to speak about these issues publicly and within their faith communities so that we can put them high on the agenda. We have a couple of slides which maybe I can share with you later, but anyway, we suggest some actions that we can all take, and these include, when we talk about climate, let's talk about money. Our money is powerful and should be funding climate justice, not climate breakdown. Watch and listen to the resources linked to in the briefing and discuss these with our faith communities. To use the briefing notes to help for us all to write to our MPs or our political representatives. And in the UK, to ask our MPs to join a parliamentary event which will be taking place on the 14th of June. If lots of us speak out about the same issues, our voices are more likely to be heard. The new policy banning the use of the aid budget to fund fossil fuel projects was a big win for faith campaigners. And we've already seen from our conversations with civil servants in the UK that it now understands it can't ignore loss and damage completely. When we speak out, we do make a difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Yeah, this is really incredible to hear. And I'm also very happy to know that there are so much work in the faith communities in UK and also the Interfaith Scotland and Interfaith Glasgow. There's a huge way of preparing for the COP that after being to COPs for the last 15 years, I see that we have never seen something like this before. So it's very promising to see that the different faith traditions come together to act on this and to have this moral voice, to have the climate justice, to talk about climate and to talk about money, where the money went. And I'm a bit annoyed at the Church of England that are not really divesting fast enough from the fossil fuels that they have their some of the money. And so the more pressure we can get also on our own faith communities where they have their finance to put a pressure on them as well to also act on by themselves. I want to invite you for just a short kind of a reaction or what you want to say again. And I will invite Matthias again to after this round to see if you have any more that you want to add or want to react to from the other panelists. Please, Matthias.
Thank you, Henrik, and thanks everyone. I think listening to all these good interventions, I really also get inspired, and I think what has been said already many times, that when we stand together as interfaith community, we also have a strong voice, and we can make a difference. And I would emphasize again the national level, because people are listening to us, people and communities are listening to us, and politicians, they want to be re-elected. And to be re-elected, they need the support from the people. So when we engage in the debate about climate change, it's not always the the straight way to the politicians. It's as much to the people and our congregations and our faith leaders, as Henrik mentioned. We can, through our big outreach, we can make a big difference, and this is the potential I think we should explore even more in cooperation. So I have hope, I have faith, and I really hope that COP26 will deliver a successful result, leaving no one behind, ensuring that those who are most vulnerable to climate change also are remembered. This is something we will work for, at least. Thank you.
Shaheen, you want to comment or any last?
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much, Henrik. Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, Matthias. I mean, I think we as Muslim communities, there's a lot more that we need to do globally, worldwide, in educating our communities. And, you know, at the same time, you know, when we look at Hajj, which is a major pillar of Islam, and what we've yet to undertake, you know, it's a journey that is full of physical endurance. But if we don't act, it's going to become more grueling in the next coming years. Scientists predict that heat and humidity during Hajj will exceed the extreme danger threshold by 20%. That means that, you know, it will be so difficult to perform a pilgrimage between 2045 and 2053. So, I mean, I think for us, we have to take up environmental stewardship. We have to be advocating by our faith. The Quran speaks around the caretakers of the earth. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, spoke about planting trees and creating conservation areas called Himma. But we still need to mobilize Muslims on a mass scale to be able to see a new global eco space. You know, Muslims Islam inherently has understood environmentalism, but I feel as though there's so much more that we need to do with our faith communities to be able to channel so many things in around it. You know, when we ask, you know, when I spoke about just transition, you know, what kind of planet are we going to inherit? What kind of planet are children going to inherit? You know, so who is going to perform pilgrimage in those spaces? When we're talking about sacred rights, you know, there is a climate crisis, but it's also endangering the very age-old sacred rights that we have in our communities. And the environmental threat to the holy pilgrimage for us is like a red panic button. And we as British Muslims and Muslims around the world have to take this signaling that the climate crisis is here and it's to stay, and we have to do something about it. So that's the message from us, and that's the message that we will take towards COP26 by mobilizing people. And having said that, you know, we're working with Greenpeace in the Middle East called Ummah for Earth, where we're mobilizing a lot of young influencers to take climate seriously, specifically from the Middle East perspective. Lots more work to do, let's just say. But I think we can do this if we come together as faith communities, because it does not affect just one community, it will affect all of us. Thank you, Henrik.
Thank you so much, and it's very powerful to hear that the mobilization of the Muslim communities, and I think this is really important for the future to have from our different traditions that we come together and actually fight climate change in the best way we can. Olivia, I give the word to you last for comment or any final remarks, please.
Thank you, Henrik. So I suppose I just want to really reiterate that we've got a moral voice and that together we stand strongly. And also that to clarify some of these issues, which are quite complex, you know, you talk about loss and damage. I'm a lay person. I didn't understand it at all. And to understand, you know, to clarify it, to understand that we have a responsibility towards the global south and towards areas where there is already a huge impact of climate change is really important. And I feel the more we can bring that onto the agenda, the better. And to connect it to social justice, to build back better, the just transition, all of these issues are interconnected, aren't they? So the more we can find clear ways of speaking out and reaching people, and also just talking about our moral responsibility think that's where we can have an influence in our own communities and also in the political environment in our countries. As Matthias said, that's probably where we can have most influence. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you all. And we are getting closer to the final of this this webinar. Just before I leave the word to Bishop Philip Hudgens, who is up very late in Australia following this webinar, I just want to say I'm so happy to have this kind of broad picture on climate change and from faith communities. Started with Jamie going through the UNFCCC and also from that part with Niklas on what is a fair share actually when it comes and net zero, how this word mean really nothing, how we have to be sort of critical to what we are listening to, and the witnessing we get from the Arctic, from Bangladesh and from Burundi. I think that is very powerful to hear those voices. And now these last three panelists who give the importance of moral voice, the just transition, the loss and damage, the different kind of parts of financial situation that is connected, the new economy that we need to fight climate change. So very thankful for all of this. And I leave the word to Philip, please.
Golly, thank you very much. Look, it's been incredibly moving to listen tonight. When we had the idea of having this webinar, we kind of just had an instinct that maybe it was time to try and bring people together to really get focused towards the COP together and to build up our solidarity internationally. And, you know, it is just been so beautiful to listen to the depth of the intensity, the passion, the unity that we all share, and the love in people to do their best, the love of creation, the love of one another, the yearning to see justice, to see a just transition, and to do no further harm to the creation. So thank you to all those who've contributed, either as a panelist or as moderators, a most wonderful group of people. It may be that when our little group that put this together reconvene, we might think that perhaps we should touch base again in another period, maybe 6 weeks or 2 months. But tonight, today, whatever time frame you're in, it has been deeply moving and quite wonderful and very informative. So thank you to everybody who's made their contributions. We take what's in our hearts now into the political reality and bring about the change that we know is so necessary, and do it as fast as we possibly can. So thank you so much, everybody that's made their contributions. Peace be with you.
Thank you, Philip. I also wanted to thank an architect of this side event that wasn't so visible, who's Henrik. He's really put a lot of work for all of this to happen. So thanks, Henrik. We have a tradition also is to end with a few moments of silence. So I would like to invite all of you to spend a few seconds or minutes of silence to accompany this whole process with a deep intention. And also after that, we thought it would be good to share with all of you a few climate action possibilities. So we'll share a few links with you. But first of all, let's have some powerful silence. Thanks to all of you for your presence, panelists, moderators, and participants equally. It makes a big difference. Could you please share this slide now? Thank you very much. and goodbye. We'll share with you some of the information that was shared, those of you who have registered on the Zoom. Goodbye. Elena, do you have this slide or shall we forget it? Here it is coming. So these are a few tools that you can use to go deeper into your advocacy, into your reflection. And if you do have more to share with you, please don't hesitate to send us an email with more links so that we can share with all the people who participated in Zoom.
Maybe we also can say that we have a lot of good questions that we haven't really responded to, and I apologize to that, but that doesn't mean that it isn't read or isn't taken up. I think we need to have more webinars also based on the different questions. So really happy to see all of those coming in and different comments also in the chat and the Q&A part. So it's not ignorance, it's more due to time. We